This is Jamie Stegmeyer from Stegmeyer Games. It is July 14th, 2021, and I'm here as usual to spend an hour with you, answering your questions, sharing Stegmeyer Games news, and discussing a variety of random topics. And speaking of random topics, I want to talk about my chocolate of the day because I have something a little bit unique today. I went to a place called Parker's Table in St. Louis this week, or yesterday specifically, to get some bread. I went to a friend's house the other day to do an escape room. And had dinner at a friend's house with a bunch of other people. And the bread that my friend served was so delicious that I had to find out where it was. And it was from a place called Parker's Table in St. Louis. And so I went to Parker's Table yesterday and got the bread, got a couple of loaves of the bread. I got the cheese that we had because it was really delicious cheese. And I couldn't resist getting a little chocolate. I'm getting bread and chocolate and cheese. So I got these chocolate rocks, which I've had this type of thing before, but I haven't bought them in a big bag. I've had like, a little one on top of a cupcake or something like that. But I got a whole bag of chocolate rocks from Parker's Table, and they're really good. They're essentially like fancy M&Ms, but I like that they're in rock form, and so that is definitely today's chocolate of the day. What are you indulging in today? What's your little treat of the day if you're having one? I see Tim, Michelle, Tony, Carol. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to other people joining us in a few minutes as we gear up for or not we, I guess, yeah, all of us are gearing up for today's chat. Look forward to hearing any questions that you have. I have a pretty broad swath of topics to cover today. I mentioned that I did the escape room recently, so real life dexterity game escape room, and I also played disc golf last week, real life dexterity game. Some other games that I played recently were Oath, Ghost Blitz, Conspiracy on Board Game Arena, Abandon All Artichokes also on Board Game Arena, really clever deck unbuilder. We played, Megan and I played Exit, which is Exit was the Sunken Treasure. Exit the Sunken Treasure. So we did a real life escape room, and then we did an in the box escape room the other day. And I played. This is an exciting one. I played a game called Murano Light Masters. Or Murano The Light Masters. I played this on Tabletop Simulator with the designer and the publisher of this game last week. This was late last week, and this will be this will be Matago's big Essen release. And I really, really liked this game. I think it has the potential, if it takes off early on, to be a game similar to Azul and Century Spice Road. I think those are two fair comparisons to the game in that it's a beautiful game. It's very welcoming. It's very easy to get into a play, but there are lots of interesting decisions, and the components themselves are really beautiful as well. Even though I only played on Tabletop Simulator, I got that feeling from the game. So keep an eye on Murano Light Masters, because I think it has the potential to be a huge hit, and it will be released at Essen this year or around that time. I don't know. I think Essen is definitely happening, and I think they'll have it there, but who knows what happens in a few months in today's world. I had my first in-person game night, or hosted my first in-person game night in a long time. Fortunately, all of my friends are vaccinated, and that is a requirement for someone to attend one of our game nights. And we had a small game night to start this back as we get back into the swing of in-person game nights. And I played A War of Whispers, and I loved it. This is a game that came out a couple years ago, and it's a game where you're manipulating armies that are not representing you. They're just armies on a map. And it's one of those games where you just get to feel mischievous for an hour and a half. And I loved it. I mean, I really, really like this game. I rave about it in a video that will be released in a week or two on my YouTube channel. But I really, really enjoy it. I highly recommend if you're looking for a game to feel mischievous, where you're kind of steering the direction of a kingdom. It feels a little bit like Game of Thrones, or a lot like Game of Thrones. I wonder if they actually tried to get the IP and couldn't get it. But A War of Whispers, really, really enjoyed that game. Let me jump down and look at any questions that you have so far, and then I'll jump back to my random topics. I have a kind of a conversation topic that I wanted to bring up today that I'll get to in a second. Kim says that she's looking to get to Miniature Market this weekend. That's here in St. Louis. Oh, they have a garage sale, Miniature Market garage sale this weekend. Hopefully you do get some good deals there, Kim. Dave is enjoying chocolate-covered coffee beans today. That's his treat of the day. Oh, my friend Chance here. Chance says, some friends of mine are loving Red Rising, just to share some good news with you on a Wednesday morning. No, that's great to hear, Chance. I'm glad they're enjoying Red Rising. Last week I announced a small official variant for Red Rising, something I don't love doing with our games, but I thought it was a great suggestion. I want to listen to our fans, and fans of Red Rising had a little suggestion which said that you can't be targeted for a card to be banished from your hand in Red Rising unless you have more than 5 cards. or more than the number of cards that you started the game with, because there is one house that starts the game with 6 cards. And so I wanted to keep mentioning that. I mentioned that last week. I want to mention it this week too, whenever Red Rising comes up, because I think it's a pretty good rule. I think it avoids that feeling of getting banished down to 4 cards or even less than 4 cards, which really doesn't feel good. You can still win. You can still do well in Red Rising when that happens, but it doesn't feel good. It doesn't even feel good when I've done that in games of Red Rising. It doesn't feel good for me to do either. And so I like the variant that you can only do it if someone has more than 5 cards. So at least, at the very least, you're bringing them down to the number of cards that they started the game with. Good to hear from you, Chance. Carol says, did I get a second game of Oath in? Was it better? Yeah, I mentioned last week that I struggled a little bit with my first play of Oath, and this actually branches into my conversation topic of the day. So I did play Oath for a second time this past weekend, and Oath really, really is not a game for me on so many levels, so many different levels. I don't want to spend much time on that negativity at all. But the conversation topic that I wanted to bring up today briefly, I'll try to keep it fairly brief because I know people have some questions. But whenever I play a game, I rate it on Board Game Geek. That is how I track plays of games, really. That's how I track my feelings about games and which games that I've played. I don't track individual plays of games. And oftentimes I'll go back and change my reviews. If I play a game that I really enjoy, and then later I play it and I'm like, oh, it wasn't actually that good, or I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought, I'll change the rating down. Or if I play a game and I later realize, oh, I enjoy this game a lot more than I thought, I'll up the rating. So my first initial rating is not always the final rating of the game, but I do rate games the first time I play them. And it's very rare that I rate a game lower than a 6, because even a 6 to me is a game that I probably won't play again, but there's some things I appreciate about it. I appreciate the design. I am glad to have spent time with that game, and because I learned something from it, whether or not I liked it. And so it's very, very rare that I rate a game lower than 6. You can go on Board Game Geek and look at Jamie Stegmaier on Board Game Geek and see the games that I've rated lower than 6. There are very few of them. And Oath is one of them. Oath is one of those games. I don't want to beat around that bush. Oath is one of those games. But one thing I don't like to do, I don't like to broadcast that. And so I'm even hesitant to mention it today, but I'm mentioning it for a reason. Because yesterday on Twitter, someone, it wasn't malicious. It was just, I think they wanted to start a conversation maybe. Someone posted a screenshot of my rating of Oath on Twitter. And they tagged the publisher, the friend of Stonemaier Games, publisher Leader Games, and the designer. I don't know Cole at all. I don't think I've ever had any interactions with Cole, but they tagged the designer on this post. And I really didn't like this. I really didn't like that this person did this, because while I do rate games on Board Game Geek, I'm not broadcasting that rating. It is public, but I'm not. It's like, I guess I'll compare it to this. It's like when I don't enjoy a book and I rate it on Amazon or rate it on Goodreads, I don't tweet the author and say, hey, I didn't enjoy your book. Here's how little I enjoyed it. It's just a kind of a behind the scenes rating showing how I felt about the game. And so I really didn't like that this person broadcasted it. And I tweeted them and I said, would you kindly consider taking this tweet down, especially since you tagged the designer and the publisher. I'm sure you wouldn't like if someone did this to you. If you didn't like something, you wouldn't want them to actively go out of their way to tell the designer and the publisher how you felt, how you really didn't like it. But the person also responded, and they did it. They deleted the tweet, and they responded and say, Jamie, you might want to think about, like, you rated the game publicly on Board Game Geek. You rated it very low. You might want to think about that a little bit. And I don't think that argument has a lot of merit, because I think there's a big difference between rating something on a Board Game Geek, on Amazon, on Goodreads, and actively tweeting that low rating to the author or the publisher, or having someone else do that for me. Like that wasn't his place to broadcast that information, in my opinion. But what I did take away from it was, I need to think a little bit more about, given how positive I like to be on social media, I like to share the things I love. I like to share my favorite mechanisms, not my least favorite mechanisms. I don't have top 10 lists about my least favorite things. I have top 10 lists about my favorite things. I'd like to be positive on social media. But there are times where I want to discuss something that I didn't like. It's very rare, but it does happen. There's that, and I'm trying to figure out how to do that, or if I should do that at all, especially since these are my peers in the gaming industry. And it was a good reminder that when I rate something very low on Board Game Geek, as rare as that is, that I need to do more than just rate it. And so I had like a very small comment about it, just saying that I played both as an exile and as the chancellor in the game. But then after this conversation behind the scenes with this person who tweeted my rating, I decided to add a little bit more to that description to share some positivity. So I actually added some positivity to that comment about how I love the production of the game. I could tell a lot of work went into it. I like the secrets mechanism in the game, the secrets as a resource. But that that it just wasn't really at all for me a game for me. And so I don't know. I'm navigating that right now. So this is kind of my topic today. Like, have you found if you really find that you don't like something, but you want to discuss it for whatever reason? Maybe you've been thinking about it, and I have been thinking about this game. Have you found like a productive way to discuss it, or do you just not? Do you just discuss it privately, not publicly? I'm totally fine with that. That's generally what I do as well. And if you rate stuff on Board Game Geek and whenever you happen to rate something really low, if you really didn't like it, if you felt like a game was a total waste of your time, oh no, kitties, and you rate it on Board Game Geek, do you then add a description to that rating to show some sort of positivity, some sort of I don't know, some sort of reason behind the low rating? How do you do that? How do you when you are compelled to rate something low on Board Game Geek? How do you go about doing that? And is it different for I'm just a normal person like anybody else, but I understand that I have maybe a little bit more visibility in the game industry because I am a designer and publisher. Is it different for someone who is a designer and publisher in the industry? Hopefully, I kept that somewhat succinct. I feel like I've been talking for a while. But let's see. Carrie says he's having a hard time sleeping in Australia because he has a toothache. I'm sorry to hear that, Carrie. Adam says, what famous person has reached out to you to let you know that they enjoy a game from your company? This actually happened very recently. I'm glad you mentioned this, Adam. Last week, and so I've over the last year, I've become really into disc golfing. As I've talked about here, I talk about it on Instagram. And uh, one of the main YouTube channel I follow is a channel called Jomez Pro, and one of their main commentators is a guy named Jeremy. Big Germ he goes by in the disc golf world, and he reached out to me. He messaged me on Instagram. So this is a person that I watch on camera every week talking about disc golf. He's also a professional disc golfer. That's his main thing. He plays disc golf. I watch this guy. I admire what he does. I love his commentary. And he reached out to me on Instagram and said, Jamie, I'm a disc golfer. I noticed that you're a disc golfer too, and I wanted to mention that we've been playing disc golf, or we've been playing not disc golf. We've been playing Wingspan on tour. We played it at Worlds. So the Worlds tournament was very recent, and every night he said we went after we played disc golf and we finished our commentary. We went and played Wingspan, and he wanted to reach out to me to thank me for publishing the game, basically. And it was just it was a wonderful moment. It meant a lot to me that he reached out to me. That was really, really special. That this person that I admire, that I follow, that I watch on camera once a week, whenever they post new footage, reached out to me to say this. It was really incredible. And so we had a nice exchange of messages. I sent him some games that I thought he might enjoy. I think he's sending me some discs that I get to play with. So that was my fun, recent, famous person moment. In the disc golf world. So it's kind of a niche hobby, a niche world, but still really meant a lot to me personally. Adam also says, what have you been reading lately? Any summer reading recommendations? I have really been enjoying the series A Way of Shadows. I keep forgetting the official name of the series, something about a night warrior, I think. But A Way of Shadows is the first book in this series. I am 2/3 of the way through the second book. It's by Brent Weeks. Really, really great series. So if you like Brent Weeks' Lightbringer series, I highly recommend this one. If you're not familiar with Brent Weeks at all, but you like fantasy with somewhat dark worlds, the worlds are a little dark, but it's not grim dark. Just a great series. The Lightbringer is a fantastic 5-book series. That is complete. The A Way of Shadows series is a trilogy, and it is also complete. So if you want to get into a book series that is complete, that you could actually just read through this summer, I recommend both of those. David says, we have just received Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. Have you ever thought about making a slightly different version of an existing game? He says, in this case, I think it was geared to make a bit simpler and cheaper to reach a different market. Not sure if this is similar to what you did with viticulture. Is this coming for publishers? The one instance where we have done this, and the gameplay was actually the same, but with Red Rising, we made two versions. We made a collector's version, and then with exact identical gameplay, but with less expensive components in terms of like plastic tokens instead of metal, no gold foil, no card holders, a more basic insert. We have a a retail version of the game that is $40 instead of $65. So that is one that we definitely we don't often think about games that way. We want to make something beautiful but affordable for everyone when we make a game. But this was one case where we thought, the Red Rising audience, the book loving audience, um, probably isn't used to spending 50, 60, $70 for a game, and we want the game to be accessible for them. And so we made a $40 version of the game for them or anyone who wants to get it from their local retailer. I totally support that. Matthew says he would love to get my thoughts on a recent question asked in the Board Game Design Lab Facebook group. Do you consider game design art? Do you think of yourself as an artist? I definitely don't think of myself as an artist, but I do think as a form. I think games are both art and entertainment, in that art can be entertainment. But yeah, I mean, like if someone paints a painting, that's art. That's a form of media. I guess I'm looking at all forms of media as art in their own respects, even though I typically look at them more as entertainment. Like I look at sports as entertainment. A lot of people get really, really into the professional football, professional baseball, as if they have some deeper meaning. I think they're just entertainment, and they're fun to watch. And I don't get frustrated when my team loses, or when I don't get overly happy either when my team wins. It's just, was I entertained or not is what I go into it looking for. But the same with movies. Like movies are entertainment. I go into a movie to be entertained, but I also think they're a form of art. Yeah. Chris said, "How's my dad doing and the cats?" And he says also really impressed with Between Two Castles expansion. My dad's doing pretty well right now. Still getting some diagnoses related to the latest cancer that he's looking at, and the cats are doing well. They're scampering all around the house today, getting in all sorts of trouble. Let's see. Just scrolling through. Facebook is moving through the questions a little faster than I thought. Simon says, "Have I played Embarcadero yet?" I have not played that game. No. I'd love to hear your favorite mechanism in that game, though, Simon, if you have one. Okay, Alex from Board Game Co. is here. He just walked in. He said, "My least favorite part about rating games poorly is the idea that the designer will eventually see it, to do it intentionally." I'm not sure where that sentence was going, that last part, Alex. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't love the idea that a peer in the industry who spent a lot of time and effort on a game is going to see a negative rating. But I also want to be honest with my ratings. Like I don't want to. Although at the same time, how important is that? Is that really important? I'm not a reviewer. I'm a game designer. I play games to have fun as a gamer, and I play games to learn from games as a designer. I just use board game rankings, or the ratings, to remember what I've played, and to help me sort through what I've played when I do top 10 lists. Yeah. Carlos says, "What was my most favorite game you played in the last month?" There's a positive question. My favorite. There are two that really have jumped to the top of the list recently, and those are Dice Miner and a War of Whispers I put up there too. Dice Miner being a shorter one, War of Whispers being a longer one. And favorite Stonemaier game, I'll throw one in there. I did get back to my Charterstone campaign recently, and we played games 7 and 8. We're playing games 9 and 10 this weekend. And I really love that game. I know it's one that I made, and I'm completely biased in saying that, but I really have enjoyed my gameplay with in the second campaign of Charterstone with some friends who hadn't played it before. What about you? What's your favorite game that you've played in the last month? Carol is talking. So I'm getting to the comments, I think, where I was talking about what happened on Twitter yesterday regarding a game that I rated poorly and someone broadcasting it. And Carol says, "Wow, that's a rude post." It did seem a bit rude. I don't think that was the intention, but I think it was a bit rude. She says, "That's like when a kid tattles something private from a sibling or a friend." It did feel a little bit like that. Yeah. Morgan says, "Did I happen to watch the Dice Tower 4-way review of Oath?" I did. There was lots of good discussion there. I like to think about what type of a player would enjoy a specific experience or mechanism. Positive and negative reviews can both be helpful. I totally agree. I think where it's a little different with me is that I'm not a reviewer, intentionally so. I don't want to be a reviewer. When I started making videos, I decided specifically that I didn't want to review games because I didn't want to have that weird, awkward interaction with my fellow peers, my designers, potentially designers who might be published by Stonemaier Games someday, when I talk about a game negatively. So that's why I simply don't do it. It's very, very rare that I say anything negative about a game. I just focus on my favorite mechanism in that game. but I also rate games on Board Game Geek, and sometimes I don't like those games. So that's the weird part of it. Carrie says that they've been playing Cascadia this week and really enjoying it. Um, Ryan says, I don't think you should fear backlash by reviewing a game. Again, I'm not a reviewer. I appreciate that. I shouldn't fear the backlash, I'm and the backlash isn't what I'm really concerned about. It's more the relationships with other designers and publishers. Ryan says, I'm curious, how did you feel when one of your games has a public negative reaction? A public reaction. That's a good question. That's a good way to flip it around. I mean, I don't read reviews about my games, whether they're positive or negative. I don't know if they are because I don't want that bias to play any role in decisions that I have about whether or not I'm going to send a future game um, to a reviewer. So that's one part of it. A public reaction, like say I hear from say I see a designer publicly tweet that they didn't like one of my games. That always feels a little weird to me. I don't know what a designer is trying to accomplish by doing that, and that's why I don't talk on social media negatively about games. Like I don't think much good comes out of that. What am I adding to the world by doing that? As a designer and a publisher, reviewers obviously they are adding something important to the world when they critique a game, but that is not me. I'm not a reviewer. Uh, I think it's different though. Like, and at the same time, I don't look at Board Game Geek rankings. There might be many designers who rank my games poorly on Board Game Geek, but I will never know because I don't want to know that. I don't want. I'm okay with someone having a negative opinion about my game, and I don't want that to impact a potential relationship that I might have with that designer or that publisher in the future. So I don't even look. I don't even look at that. And it would be weird if someone else broadcasted one of those opinions to me. Let's see. Jacob says, I don't think you have to explain why you don't like a game. We're talking about how I do that and how I did that in the comments of this game that I rated pretty lowly recently. Michael says this review being a tweeted thing, or not review, again, just a rating. This rating being tweeted thing reminds me um, of a situation where I moved to a medium-sized city in Western Australia after moving back from the U.S. Turned out that there was a decent chance that I taught the children of the proprietors of the restaurants uh, a game mixed or poor reviews on Yelp. Sort of gave up on reviewing local places for fear of ill will. So you're saying, yeah, reviewing things on Yelp? Yeah. Justin says, for Room 51, we always try to keep it positive when it comes to discussing games publicly. The exception is when we're having a discussion that is inherently about the negative aspects of board games, such as poor mechanisms, overstaying their welcome, etc. Um, I think it's really good to be mindful of where you're having these discussions. It's a pretty bad idea to start a negative discussion on social media, but not a terrible on a personal live stream, in my opinion. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Like the medium that you choose, are you making it an active discussion? Social media can be something that you're just like blasting out there and then stepping away. Or if you have a video about it, like Justin, you do Room 51 videos, podcasts, where you're opening it up for discussion. You're trying to have a discussion with people where you can moderate the comments a little bit. So if someone jumps in and they're just super aggressive and negative, you can moderate that a little bit, whereas that's tougher on social media. Yeah, interesting thoughts there. Juicer says, would you be interested in involving fans in the design of a new game as much as you've done with the nesting box? No, not really. No, I mean, I think designing with hundreds of people is I mean, I would say almost never a good idea. I don't think you're going to end up with something good. Like imagine trying to write a movie with 100 other writers. It wouldn't be good. Um, but I think at the same time, creating a game is not a solo experience. When I design a game, it's not just me. Yes, I'm the designer. I'm spending a ton of my time on the game, but I'm getting feedback from playtesters. Ton of feedback from playtesters, both locally and blind playtesters. So even though those playtesters are not charged with the design of the game, that's not their role. Their role is to find the things, to experience the game, to help balance it with their data and their feedback. But no, to design something collectively with people, I don't think it really ends up well. The nesting box is a little weird situation because I'm still the designer of the nesting box, not in terms of ego at all, but there's someone who ultimately has to make the decisions about that thing. But sharing it publicly to get feedback about it is essentially the playtesting process for the nesting box. And yeah, I'm doing that publicly this time because I don't think it works as well privately to gather the feedback about this box. Like I really want this box to work for a lot of different people who use Wingspan in different ways. whereas a playtesting process is a little different. Jared says he avoids rating games unless I love them and want to give them a 5-star review. I'll review them and put my thoughts out there, but an actual star rating feels too objective to me. I can definitely see that. Critchy says, did you like both Forest of Pangea and First Ascent? Which one are you backing? I am backing First Ascent because I really love indoor rock climbing, and the design looks really clever to me. I didn't back Forest of Pangea, but it looks interesting, and I think a friend is backing it, so I'll play their copy. Greg says, I recently saw a series of posts from a game designer describing the current situation with increased shipping costs on the impact of some of those designers operating on very low margins. Was this Eduardo Baraf's video on Pencil First Games? I just watched that yesterday. Do you have any observations on this and how cost issues may affect future Stonemaier products? Greg, this is a big topic, too much that I could cover here, but look on the Stonemaier Games blog because just about a week ago I talked about the impact of, I have a detailed post about increase in freight shipping cost. And the most important takeaway from that post is that the important number that I think people need to ask, whenever you see a company broadcast that, hey, I just paid $20,000 for a container, that number is largely irrelevant. The relevant cost is the increase in cost per unit paired with how they sold that game or how they intend to sell that game. It is very like $3, like a $3 increase per unit based on those shipping costs is very different if you're selling that game to a distributor versus if you sold that game for nearly full MSRP on Kickstarter. There's a huge difference there. And I think that's the question that people need to ask whenever they see someone broadcasting that information. The total cost of the container, while it is a big number and it's a big scary number, is not all that important. The important number is the increase per unit and how that unit is being sold. And I talk about that in detail in my post that you can find recently on Stonemaier Games blog. Michael says, how's the new Australian storefront working out on your end? It's working out great. It is essentially double the work, but we're splitting that work over multiple people because whenever I modify anything on the Stonemaier, on the international web store, we're calling it, the worldwide store, we also have to modify it in the Australian store, and now we're adding a Canadian one too. These are one storefront for each of our fulfillment centers, but we did it because we wanted to better serve you, Michael. We wanted to better serve our customers, and so it's worth the extra time and effort to do it, and it helps us keep much better track, not better track, but before, like if you bought something from our store, there was no way in Shopify for you to know if we actually had that in stock in Australia or if we just had it in stock somewhere in one of our web stores, which doesn't really help you if it's not in stock in Australia. Well, where now, if you buy something from the Australian web store, you know that it is in stock because that is only looking at the inventory that we have in our Australian warehouse. Yeah. Solomon also has a question about the freight shipping thing. Solomon, I'd encourage you to look at that freight shipping post. Your question is a little bit different though. You say the current crisis in worldwide shipping affecting supply chains, not just delivery of board games. Any comments about like the general supply chains of things? No, I don't know about the general supply chains of things. I know it's very it's impacted a lot of different industries in weird ways. Like recently, I've been playing games at a friend's house on the weekends, and I get gelato on the way home. And the place where I get gelato doesn't have plastic tops right now because the supply chain for plastic tops of gelato containers is not working right now. They can't get them, and so I have some drippy gelato in my car right now because of this. So yeah, weird things are happening with supply chains. Costs are up, schedules are unpredictable, and I'm just hoping it gets better, really. Yeah. Oh, I think Facebook just skipped a question. As always, if I accidentally skip one of your questions, unless you were asking for a spoiler, please repeat the question because I did not intentionally repeat it or skip it. Gerald has a long comment that I have a feeling Facebook's going to skip over while I read it, but let's see if I can get to it. He says, it's difficult because in this day and age, we have to assume that anything posted publicly on the internet is something written in ink and can be dispersed without our permission. Whether or not we intend to let the creator know of negative reviews, I feel like we can't expect information like this to not be shared with others when we post in a public forum. Especially being a public figure in this hobby, I feel like others will scrutinize one more closely than others. It's difficult because I also see BGG to be a great tool to collect information about games I've played and my thoughts, but this doesn't necessarily mean I use it as a platform to broadcast my view. I wonder if there is a way to make ratings private on Board Game Geek. Really well said there, Gerald, and I agree. Yeah, I am making the decision to post or to rate games on Board Game Geek. That is my decision. I understand they are public, and if I can make them private, I probably would, because I am not posting my ratings there to broadcast them to anyone, and I especially am not broadcasting those opinions. I'm just rating them on Board Game Geek to track my thoughts and track my played games there. Kevin says he tried teaching Red Rising to his kids last night. He says his oldest had a combo has a gaming mind and obliterated the rest of us. My youngsters didn't get it or enjoy it. Do you have any plans to do more designs like My Little Scythe to encourage family play? We don't have any other games like My Little Scythe in the works, but I do design all of our games in mind with accessibility in mind because I want them to be accessible to families, just as they are accessible to experienced gamers. Yeah. Michael says, "Do you ever refrain from rating a game because it's clearly just you? You can see it's a good game, but you're not the target audience." I let that impact my review actually. So if I play a game that I really don't enjoy, but I admire the design, that will impact my rating. That might bump a game up from a 6 to a 7. Even though like my experience of the game might have been a 6. If I'm like, oh wow, I can tell like there's some brilliant systems here, but it just wasn't for me. That personally will increase my rating on Board Game Geek. Yeah. Scott says people should also remember that game reviews are open to interpretation. All gamers and groups have different tastes, and it's nice to know the bad going into a game. Sometimes we only see the positive reviews and get a shocking surprise. Zach says, I saw someone did a 10 plays of 10 games in 24 hours. Do you think it would be possible to play 10 of the 11 Stonemaier games 10 times in 24 hours? 10 of the games. So play them 10 times in 24 hours? No. I think you could play 10 of our games in 24 hours, but not 10 times each. That would be incredible. Tim says, as a public face of the industry, maybe you could just not rate the games that you don't like. That's definitely a consideration. I think I'd prefer for my reviews just to be private, or not my ratings to be private. Again, I don't review games, but I could just not rate the games I don't like. I could, and maybe I should. Maybe that is part of the answer here. Yeah. Isaiah is asking for why so he says, I was surprised to see your relatively low rating for Oath on Board Game Geek. I would love some insights into why it wasn't very high for you. And I'm not going to do that. I appreciate you asking about that, but this is the whole thing for me. Like, even though I don't like some games, I don't want to spend time talking about why I don't like them. Like, that's not how I want to spend my time. That's not the negative. I don't want to spread that negative energy out into the universe. Yes, there's some things I don't like. I'd rather spend that time talking about what I do enjoy, what's positive, and what I do like. So yeah, that's what this boils down to. I don't want to spend time on negativity. It doesn't feel good to me. Yeah. Francis says, who are my 3 favorite artists in board games? Ooh, that's tough. I love so many different artists out there. I have a post about 200 plus artists in the industry that I really, really love or that I want to work with. And I guess a few of the ones that I think are amazing people and amazing artists that I've had the pleasure of working with. Andrew Bosley, or Bosley. I always mispronounce his last name. I think it's Bosley. Maybe Andrew can correct me there. Love working with him. I love Jackie Davis. Jackie Davis is incredible. And I got Natalia and Anna, who do the birds for Wingspan. They're incredible to work with. Incredible people, incredible artists. Yeah, they're truly incredible. And then my up and comer, I would say Miles Bensky. Miles also worked with Jackie on Red Rising. And Miles, I've seen his talent go from basically nothing. Like he was not an artist, and he has taught himself over the last few years to become an artist. And it's incredible to see his talent curve based on how much work he's put into his art. So yeah, I got to mention Miles in there too. Max says, if I happen to be visiting St. Louis, are there any public gaming events that I can attend where I might possibly bump into you? Yes, and that event is Geekway to the West. It's a very specific event. It's usually in May or June. This year, it's October 6th through the 8th. And I love playing games with just random people there. So if you want to play games with me, Geekway to the West is the way to do it. That's October 6th through the 8th this year here in St. Louis. Matthias says, is Euphoria finished like Scythe, or can we expect more expansion sometime in the future? unlike Scythe having like a definitive end to the story and us saying we're not making more Scythe stuff for Scythe the tabletop game. Um, I haven't said that about Euphoria, but I think it probably is finished. I think we're done making new stuff for Euphoria, and we'll just continue to support the game by reprinting the core game and the expansion. I think so, but don't hold me to that because that is not like a definitive end to it. Just probably not. John says, "What are your thoughts on two small expansions being released at the same time? Draftosaurus, for example, has two small expansions that have a combined cost more than the base game, and you basically only get 40% of the content, 20% each." I don't know. It's hard for me to comment on the price because the price is often dependent on how much it costs to make the expansion. So it's certainly possible that those expansions cost more to make than the core game. And I can see why they split them into two expansions there because that way people don't feel like they're paying for more than the core game if they had to buy the two of those things together. Um, so I actually think that was a pretty smart strategy for them to do that. Releasing it at the same time might be a little weird, but that way people can consolidate shipping if they're ordering directly from the company that publishes Draftosaurus or directly from the publisher. So interesting strategy. Yeah, I'm guessing they developed and they designed and developed those expansions at the same time, realized that the price would be too high, and split them up and just said, let's just go with it. Let's just publish them at the same time. I'm curious what the publisher says about that, why they did that. Adam says, have I ever felt rushed to put out a product to meet a certain deadline? And the wonderful thing about running a publishing company that doesn't use Kickstarter is no, I don't. I can publish a game whenever I want. I can spend as much time as we need to get the game right to get it out there. So no, I we kind of avoid that at all costs. I think the only time that I felt a little rushed is when we've completely made the game and we have started, like the print run has literally started. They're ready to start like assembling the components that we've already spent months making, and we find something that doesn't quite work the way that we hoped. That is frustrating because I wish that we could have found it out sooner. I wish we could have gotten samples of that thing sooner. And at that point, we've already made the thing. It would be a monumental waste to get rid of that thing or to change it up at that point. So I don't really feel rushed then. But at that point, I'm like, we've come this far. We've already made it. Let's just go through with it, unless it's a total catastrophe, and then we have to redo it at that point. But it's very rare that that's happened. Josh says, I just wanted to thank you for exposing me to the Red Rising series. I've read the entire series and it was fantastic. It definitely made the game even more enjoyable. I'm so glad to hear that, Josh. I'm really glad that you enjoyed the book and the game. I do have some other quick topics to cover today, and then I'll get down to questions for the rest of the chat. And Walter's here to announce his presence. You can see Walter walking to frame there. Just like little topics here and there. Had a great playtest last week of a game that I will soon be writing the rules for, getting to that stage where I need to write the rules, which is an interesting stage in the playtest process because often while writing the rules, I realize this is just too complicated to explain or too complex. This is just too hard to explain. And I can't expect someone to be able to understand this and learn the game from the rules. So I actually need to change the mechanisms around around the idea of writing the rules. So it's an interesting step in the playtesting process. I did a long form video this past Sunday, about Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, all the different things I learned from playing through the 5 tutorial missions in Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. They're excellent tutorials, truly, truly excellent tutorials. If you want to learn about tutorials from a game design perspective, I highly recommend playing through those tutorial missions in Gloomhaven. Also did blog post about the top 10 things. It was inspired by Alex, who chimed in earlier, Alex from Board Game Co. Alex did a video about 5 or 6 things that can make a campaign fail, and I extended that to a full top 10 list on my blog about 10 reasons why your Kickstarter campaign may fail. I also did a blog post about exit strategies this past Monday, about exit strategies specifically in reference to the tabletop game industry. Basically, the idea of what are the ways that if you decided you wanted to stop being a game publisher, what are the ways that you could do that? And I detail them in this blog post. I've also spent some time this week working on our charity auction. We have our annual charity auction coming up probably in early October is when I've scheduled it. And I have now sent out the invites to the media, the content creators in the game industry that I want to include in this year's charity auction. The general idea behind the charity auction is that I pick a few content creators that I really love, that I want more people to know about, that I haven't featured in the past, and they get to choose a charity of their choice, and then we have 10, usually around 10 different auction items. They're the same items repeated for each of these content creators. Where if you are the winning bidder on the auction item, all of your funds go to the charity of choice for that specific auction selected by that content creator, and you get all the stuff that we put into that auction. I haven't decided exactly what we're doing for each auction yet this year, but it probably involved like signed copies of Red Rising and Rolling Realms and the Tapestry expansion, stuff like that. And then Stonemaier Games and Fulfill Right. Well, Stonemaier Games, let's say like this: Fulfill Right takes the top winning bid from all of the auctions, and they match it. They match that donation to the charity of choice. Stonemaier Games then looks at the other 9 winning bids, and we match that donation as well. So all the money that the winning bidders spend goes to the auction, and we double it based on us wanting to double it and give more to charity. So been arranging that right now. I'll talk about that a lot more in early October, late September. But obviously we have to work on these things in advance. So I've been working on that this week. And last, I was on the Board Game Binge podcast, mostly about Red Rising. I was there with my coworker Alex last week, the Board Game Binge podcast, and that's on YouTube. Feel free to check that out on YouTube, and it's also on wherever you get podcasts. All right, those are all my topics today. So let me scroll down. Lots of questions and comments today that I will get to here. Let's see. Culver says, what game release has made me the most nervous? So I'm assuming this is a Stonemaier Games release. What has made me the most nervous? Probably Red Rising. I mean, not that I was worried that it would go poorly, but I had spent so many years working on the Red Rising game and trying to get it right and failing and loving this IP so much that I just wanted to do it justice. I wanted people to try out the game, and so that was probably one of the most nervous I was. Yeah. Dexter says, any news on more Tapestry? Yes, we do have an expansion plan that I've announced that we have an expansion, but I haven't told people what it is yet. And we will discuss that more later this year. The state of freight shipping is so uncertain that I can't even say a date for when I'll start talking about it. But later this year is when I will start talking about the Tapestry expansion, the second Tapestry expansion. Sean says, what are my thoughts about a touchscreen being used as a board for games like Gloomhaven? If it was interactive and showed the enemies but would still use the figures. Generally, I mean, one of the reasons I play board games is to turn off screens. And so there are games where I think screens can add a huge asset to the game. And there are platforms like TapTop that are trying to put games on digital screens. There's some cool stuff, things that you can do with that. But I don't know. I like turning off screens when I play games in general. Yeah. Gerald says, how's my heist game going? Did I ever prototype it? I still want to make a heist game, but I haven't prototyped it yet. Or I haven't even delved too deep into the brainstorming process of it. Phil says, would it be possible to include an order for replacement components together with a purchase of new products from my store for shipping to the UK? It's a great question. And no. Our replacement parts system is separate from our fulfillment system, completely different systems. However, a couple things there, Phil, that you should know. One, if you're in the UK, our fulfillment center is also in the UK. We have fulfillment centers in the UK, Canada, the US, and Australia. So if you order something from our online store, it's going to be shipped to you from the UK. Also, if you request a replacement part, our replacement parts helpers are around the world too, including Mark in the UK. So Mark is not the same as our fulfillment center there, but Mark is in the UK, and if you request a replacement part, Mark will send it from his house in the UK directly to you. So yeah, if you need replacement parts, it sounds like you have some cards that were damaged, just fill out the replacement parts form on our website, and Mark will ship them to you. And then also, if there's something that you want on our web store, you can go to our web store and we will ship that item to you from the UK as well. Yeah. Scott says, have I seen Oros coming soon on Kickstarter? Oros. I don't think I have seen that, Scott. No. Allison says, we play as a family and don't get junior versions anymore. So this is, I think, tying to the question earlier about Milo Scythe. Are we making more games like Milo Scythe? I think it's a fair way of saying that it's a junior version of Scythe. Yeah. Allison says, we have an 8 and an 11-year-old that continue to surprise us with how well they pick up and play heavier strategy games. I appreciate these junior versions, but allowing kids to take on the full games has been fun to experience. Yeah, your kids are very sharp, Allison, and I'm glad they do that. But I wonder if part of that is because you haven't given them as many of the junior options. You've challenged them to say, hey, here's the real version of the game, the full version of the game. Not that Milo Scythe isn't the full version; it's very much its own thing. But here's the full experience. Go for it, learn it, challenge yourself, and learn from it. I think that's a fun way to go. And it may not always hit home the first time you play. It might take a couple plays of a game. But I think that's, I don't have kids. I have no advice to give to parents. But Allison does, because does have this experience, and I'm glad to hear that. So Allison has a comment about negative reviews as well. She says, totally agree with not sharing negative reviews. Daniel and I just did a video on this as well. Why would we share a game we don't think will be a good fit? Let's talk about the dozens of games that we are more confident would fit our audience taste. And that's totally, I mean, that's, even though I'm not a reviewer, that's where I stand as well. I want to talk about the things that I love. And that's, I think, where the weird conflict comes in, because I also want to rate the games on Board Game Geek that I play. Like, because that's how I track my opinions about games. It's how I track my plays of games on Board Game Geek. And so, can I do that? Can I do both? Can I be always positive on social media and my YouTube channel and Instagram? Can I be always positive there? But also, every now and then, rate a game that I don't like on Board Game Geek. Can I have both of those things, or do I just need to pick one and stick with it? And in that case, I would definitely just choose the positive option and just not rate the games that I don't enjoy on Board Game Geek. Donna says, I had the pleasure of running Scythe at a convention in August. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that, Donna. Do you have any suggestions on the best ways to teach to others? I do, and I have a video about it. And I think that's probably the best way for me to recommend that you check that out rather than having me summarize it here, because I'm getting a little bit low on time here. But yeah, check out How to Teach Scythe on YouTube, and you will see my face, younger, pop up, and a younger version of me, and I will talk about how I teach Scythe. I'm almost positive I have this. If I don't, correct me, let me know if I don't have it, because I definitely have a video about how to play Scythe. This is a different video about how I teach Scythe. I sure hope I have it. But basically, I use the start guide, the starting card guides that I include in Scythe, and I take turns for each of the players until they understand the actions. It takes a round or two for me to take those turns for them, and then I let them free and explain things as we go. David says that I sort of did that for Rolling Realms, which is super fun to play along every time, but also great to see your creative process. That's true, David. I would say that with Rolling Realms, I was playtesting publicly. And you're right, it was a public experience, but which I guess is a little different. But it's very rare that I would playtest that publicly, playtest a game that publicly. It's usually a much more structured format. And we did also playtest Rolling Realms privately after those public playtests. Yeah. Dusty is joining us from the mill. Hey, Dusty, thanks for popping in today. It looks like I'm 9 minutes behind. David says, I had to step away and I missed if you answered my question about the progress of Tapestry on Board Game Arena. It is an alpha version right now. I played it, I think, 2 weeks ago and gave a lot of feedback to the developer. But I think it's on the right track. Just has some little hiccups that need to be solved as it gets through alpha. So if you have alpha access on Board Game Arena, please playtest. Use that access to playtest Tapestry and offer your feedback on it. Find all those little glitches before it goes to beta. Samuel says, would I ever consider publishing some sort of making of book with materials from my games prototypes? I'd love to see that. And probably not a book, but I do this in the design diaries for our games. So I haven't always done the design diaries, but I think I started with Charterstone. So if you go back to even Charterstone, you can see design diaries for all of our games with a lot of photos, a lot of talk about the decisions that went into them, photos of old prototypes, things like that. So there's a wealth of those on our website right now that you can check out. Lise says, am I making new realistic resources in the future? No, we actually sold that part of our company to I'm totally blanking on the name of the company. Not MapleSource. Board Game. Oh no. It's not Broken Token. Top Shelf Gamer. Yeah. Sorry, Top Shelf Gamer. Awesome company. And they own that line of games now, and they are making more realistic resources at Top Shelf Gamer. Yeah. Giovanni says, have I watched Black Widow? I have watched it. Yeah, we watched it this past weekend on Disney Plus, and I wrote about it on my personal blog, jamiestegmeyer.com. He says, also, what is your favorite Marvel hero and favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe movie or series? I rated them a while ago. I'll just say off the top of my head some of my favorites. Iron Man is probably my favorite, and the first Iron Man movie and the first Infinity War movie are probably up there among my favorites. I also really love the third Thor movie, the latest Thor movie. I really, really loved. Let's see. Max says, I see that some game designers seem to work almost exclusively with certain artists. Have I considered engaging artists exclusively for my games? What are the pros and cons of doing so? It's a big topic. I'll try to answer it really briefly. It's something I have considered, but because all of our games are set in different worlds, I like finding the right art for that world and that game, and that doesn't always mean that it's the same artist. In fact, I think it's almost impossible to do that unless I'm designing around that art every time. But yeah, I like exploring different worlds, and different artists come go hand in hand with that. Um, I have considered it in the past a little bit. There were a few artists that I talked a little bit about that with, because they are so versatile in the styles that they can work in. They can do completely different styles. But what are the pros? So I think it's mostly cons, honestly, because it reduces your flexibility. Like, you might have a game that really would have a better visual style if you used a different artist or work with a different artist, and you're kind of just pigeonholed into this one artist that you said, okay, we're going to make everything with you. I said the main pro is for the artists themselves, because they get a salary instead of most artists work freelance and work from job to job. An artist would get, if you worked only with one, if you had like an in-house artist, they would have a full-time salary, which I think would be a major benefit for some artists. Yeah. Any artists watching this who want to comment on that? What your thoughts about that? If you'd ever want to work full-time for one designer or one publisher? Yeah. And let's see. Tony says, as a designer and a publisher, I'm sure you've grown and learned from every release that you've been involved in. I'm try to, yeah, and definitely try. Without getting specific, unless you want to, what's one Stonemaier game that, looking back, you now feel you would have designed, developed, or distributed differently, knowing what you know now? I mean, there's at least one element of every game that I would design, develop, or distribute differently. Like, for example, Between Two Castles. I wish we had included a solo mode in it from day one, and I wish I had done the announcement a little differently. It was the first time, or the only time, that I did an announcement. I announced the game and started accepting pre-orders for it on the same day. And since then, we started spacing things out a little bit more, spacing out even. So, like with the Tapestry release, we announced it in advance. I built up to it, but we did reviews on the same day as the pre-order, and even that I think was too tight. So now I do reviews like a week or two in advance of the release of the game. So constantly a learning process about how we release games. And for design, for every game, there's some design element that I like. A game, in my mind, is never 100% complete. It's really hard for it to be 100% complete, as hard as we try, because there's always there's so much to learn from playing a game, from hearing from thousands of other people who play a game. So yeah, with any game, there's little things that I might tweak in here and there, but overall, I'm happy with how our games turned out. Yeah. Let's see. Um, just looking for any remaining questions as I wrap up today. Alex, thank you, Alex. Yeah, Top Shelf Gamer. Totally blanked on that name. Um, oh, David says that Tapestry is in private alpha, and he would do it if he get an invite. I don't have control over the invites there, but feel free to contact Board Game Arena and ask for a private invite to Tapestry's alpha version right now. I didn't know it was a private alpha. Carrie says, most of my gaming is only at 2 players. What's my thoughts on a model where you can buy the basis of a game and buy add-on packs for higher player counts? I feel like I spend a ton of money for board games with components that will never get used. Don't get me wrong, it really doesn't bother me all that much, but I consider most games great value, but I feel sorry for all those meeples that never get out of the box. Yeah, I've been thinking about that in recent years, Carrie. That's a really interesting question. And it's one of the reasons that every year I poll people in our demographic survey to ask what player counts they play. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. The 2020 demographic. Let's see if I can pull this up. I asked for player counts. Let's see if I posted about that. Player counts. Okay, yeah. Well, no, this isn't quite it. So, okay, yeah, I kind of answer it here. So I say, in what situation do you typically play games? 8.7% of people, so this is around 4,000 responses. Around 9% of people, I would say 9% instead of 8.7, play solo. And then another 30% play one-on-one. And then the rest are with multiple people, with more than just one-on-one. So we're looking at 40% of people play games with either 1 or 2 players, which is a significant amount. And you're right. There's some games that play at higher player counts where you really don't have many redundant components, but there are others that are like that. Like in viticulture. If you only play viticulture with 2 players, you never need 4 sets of meeples. You just don't need them. But you paid for them, and that probably doesn't feel great. And so, yeah, it is something I've explored a little bit. I think there's a way. I don't want to reveal it yet, but I think I have a way we're going to test that addresses this. But I'm curious if like I think some other companies have done it a little bit, but especially since some of our games does sell some things directly, I think it is something that we could try. This isn't the method that I'm talking about, but where we sell a game as a two-player game, and then you can add the other components for other player counts based on exactly the number of player counts that you want, that you need. It's actually the reason that we sell the Wingspan Neoprene playmat individually instead of as a pack of 5, because I know that there are plenty of people who play Wingspan just one player or just two player, but they wanted the neoprene playmat. I didn't want to ask them to pay for a bunch of stuff that, especially for an accessory that they weren't ever going to use. I think that's a great question. I'd love to see that explored by other publishers, other content creators too, and see what they think. Alex says that Thor Ragnarok is yeah, Thor Ragnarok. That's the movie I was talking about. Is their favorite so far, followed by Guardians 1, then Infinity War. I definitely put the first Guardians of the Galaxy in my top 5. That was one of the most delightful theater experiences I've ever had, because I went in with knowing nothing about it, and I loved that movie. Really, really loved that movie. I need to watch that again, in fact. Luke says, recently found out that the song Gold by the band Penny and Sparrow is based on Red Rising. I didn't know that. I'll have to check that out, Luke. Thanks for sharing that. Michael says, do some board game artists that you know not really like board games? I've often wondered if for some of them it's just about the art. Most of the, I mean, so Natalia and Anna were new to board games. They weren't gamers when they started doing the art for Wingspan, but I think they have gotten more into games since then. But it's okay if they don't. I mean, their focus is on illustrating beautiful birds. Their gaming experience has really no impact on the quality of their art at all. So yeah, there are probably a few like that, but most of the artists that we work with happen to also just be gamers. Yeah. Adam says, have I read Dresden Files by Jim Butcher? I have not. I have not, no. And almost purely because of the length of the series at this point. If it was just a trilogy, I probably would have read it by now, but it's so many books, it's a little hard for me to get into. But I've heard great things about it. Zach says, with my upcoming open world game, have I been inspired to use a spiral storybook like Sleeping Gods and Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion? I love the spiral storybooks in those games, but it does not work for the mechanisms of my game. You will see a whole new level of open world with my game. Not to diminish those games at all. I think the Sleeping Gods open world is incredible, but I think you're in for something special with the open world game that I'm working on. Yeah, it is far too big for a spiral book to contain. Yeah. Tim says, what food trucks in St. Louis do you enjoy? Hope the weather will cooperate while we're in Tower Grove Park on Friday. Yeah, Tim is doing a poetry reading in Tower Grove Park in St. Louis this Friday. And food trucks, I don't know the names of them. I think one of my favorites is K-pop. It's a Korean food truck that's really, really good. I hope they're at Food Truck Friday this weekend. Let's see. Kadrick says, any new games from Stonemaier which will be coming out this year? Yes, Rolling Realms is our second and last game coming out in 2021. And after that will be the Tapestry expansion. Yeah, so those are our last two products of the year, Rolling Realms and Tapestry expansion. All right, just reached the end. Thank you so much for this conversation today about so many different topics. I really appreciate you joining in, sharing your thoughts, sharing your questions, and I will actually funny. Alex from Board Game Co is joining us today. I am watching his video, or I'm not watching it right now, but I will get back to watching his video on should larger companies be on Kickstarter. So if you want to go watch a video about that topic, I'm curious to see what him and Jesse from Quackalope talk about in that video. So that's on YouTube, on Board Game Co. Should larger companies be on Kickstarter? Curious to hear their thoughts about that later today after lunch, I think. I'll call that off for today. I think Carrie has a great comment here that I think is worth checking out for lower player count games that can add more components for other player counts. Interesting idea. Yeah, we'll explore that in the future. All right, everybody, have a great week. I will see you next Wednesday. And if you have any questions following up as you watch this video, pop over to YouTube, post them on the YouTube version of this video so that I see them there. All right, take care. Bye.